Lucas Vebber standing by from the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. A lot of action going on with cases involving will, and one of them involves a clever stunt pulled by a town in Wisconsin to try to evade the levy limit. And let's talk about it. You guys just won a big case at the Wisconsin Supreme Court on this. Other towns, other municipalities are trying this. But no, you can't evade the levy limit that way. So tell me what's going on.
Yeah. Hey, first of all, good afternoon, Vicki. Good to talk to you. So this was a case that involved the town of Buchanan up in Outagamie County, right near Appleton. This is a town that was at their levy limit. They couldn't raise their property taxes anymore. So they were looking for alternative streams of revenue, basically more ways that they could get taxpayer money. So they created a transportation utility, and they funded it with what they called a transportation utility fee. And they just imposed that on every property owner in the city or in the town. So everybody got this fee, a couple $100 a year for some, thousands for others, depended on what type of property they were. And they proceeded to collect almost $1 million a year from that fee. We sued them back in 2020, and we originally won at the circuit court level. Because we said that was nothing more than an attempt to evade the statutory levy limit. Those are just taxes by a different name, and they're allowing them to exceed the levy limit, which the legislature imposed on them. The circuit court agreed with us. The town appealed. It made its way all the way up to the Supreme Court. Last week, in a unanimous Supreme Court of Wisconsin decision, 7-0, the court determined that it was actually an illegal tax and that it did allow them to exceed their levy limits, and they struck it down. It was a huge win for taxpayers. There are communities all around the state who are looking at this, and it certainly sends a big red flag to those communities, and it'll make them think twice about.
So you can't create a whole new utility solely and obviously to circumvent the levy limit. My question is, would the logic of the case apply to other ways municipalities circumvent the levy limit? So, okay, they don't have a transportation utility fee, but they have used their structural budget for operating expenses. Or they've used their structural budget for maintenance expenses. They don't want to go to referendum. Or they're putting everything on the tipping fee or the water utility. There's all kinds of things that have found their way to evade any kind of referendum question on increasing, people's costs by just simply shoving it into places that are wholly inappropriate. So might the logic challenge some of the other ways municipalities evade levy limits?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly could. In this case, we had a town that used a creative way to screw taxpayers over. They in no uncertain terms there. Towns everywhere, local governments everywhere are looking to raise revenue any way they can. They don't have inherent taxing authority. Governments don't have inherent fee creating authority. They can only raise those taxes and raise those fees that they've been authorized to do so by state law.
Well, right, but tipping fees are authorized by state law, right? They're authorized by state law. And yet all kinds of crazy stuff gets put on a tipping fee. Water utilities. I have the highest water bill, I think, on the planet because stuff that has nothing, that's not even related to, water at all is on the utility fee. The biggest way it happens is by putting operating expenses, things that are clearly operating expenses, and claiming that they can be covered by a structural budget. So I'm just wondering, I love the idea of what you guys did to town of Buchanan, but can it be extended?
Yeah, and I think the answer is possibly, and it would depend in each case and look at the fee, because there are some cases where the legislature has allowed certain fees to not be to be considered a true fee, and then it wouldn't be a tax subject to the levy limit. And where the legislature's allowed that to happen, probably wouldn't be able to do much with it. But in some cases, like this transportation utility fee that they have no authority for, we could stop it, and we're actively looking at those. So if any of your listeners certainly have any questions or want us to take a look at something, visit our website.
Go to Will's website, because this all starts because somebody from a town, not even a village, a town, reached out and said, this doesn't seem legal to me. And so, but for people reaching out, you're not going to be able to know even if the logic might apply to a different structure, but clearly an evasion of the levy limit, because ever since the levy limits were imposed, we've seen it, particularly with the manipulation of structural budgets.
Yep, and I think we're all frustrated every time we open our water utility bills and we see all those fees they throw on there. It's crazy.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then you'll say, well, hang on a second. We're under levy limits. Well, how in the hell did you happen to spend? I mean, Dane County's notorious. They've run up their structural budget so high. Everything under the sun might be maintenance, might be a part-time employee. It might be, but it typically would be ongoing costs. And it just gets poured into the budgets. Madison used to be more notorious for it. Paul Soglin, when he was mayor, did some work on that. Nobody ever bothers to report on it now, so I have no idea what the situation is now. But this is just something you need to watch. But now we've got this massive infusion of shared revenue. One would assume, Lucas, you'll be seeing less of it.
Yeah. Well, in a perfect world, right? But,
in a perfect world. So these kinds of we wanted to talk about this because we want other people to reach out, because I'm not sure it's going to be looked upon by all these municipalities as, well, hey, we can't do that. Maybe we'll just change the structure ever so slightly, and we'll see how long we can get away with it before somebody calls our bluff.
Absolutely, and we're gonna keep fighting the good fight. And the important thing here is that this was a unanimous Supreme Court decision. It was 7-0. Every member of the court agreed with us on this. That sends a very strong message to municipalities, and we would hope that they would heed that message. But we'll stay vigilant.
Well, it's something else that I was hoping to bring attention to. The reason I wanted to bring attention to this issue, this is something that the legislature could build on, because, as you said, there are other statutory authorities that exist that would not be successful in a 7-0 decision, but are principally similar in the way municipalities are using them to evade the levy limits. They just signed off on a gigantic increase in local government shared revenue. So, this might be a time for the legislature to say, now's the time to see if we can't, maybe rein in some of the abuses here, now that we have basically given a gift of the surplus to all these local governments in perpetuity. So, I'm just legislation idea out there could be built off of the great success you had in Town of Buchanan case.
Absolutely.
Good to have you on the program. People, keep Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. Just keep them on a sheet of paper, something, because you never know when you might be the person with the case. Thanks so much, Lucas, for joining me on the program today. Good to have you. Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, will-law.org is where you can find them.